Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first meeting of I want to say spring because it feels like spring, but it's still sort of winter, right? At least for a few more weeks. The February 26, 2025 meeting of the Northampton Community Preservation Committee. Um, with all of the agonizing cuts being made or suggested at the federal level, it's always nice to be in a committee that is giving out money rather than cutting back money. So um, that's something that I celebrate the work of this committee. As always, we begin meetings with general public comment. If anyone is out there who's not coming on um, interested in commenting on the Forbes project, is there any general public comment from folks who are out? Raise your hand if that is so, or give a shout out. No? Okay, looks like we are good to go.
Hello. Hello?
And yes, Daniel?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Um, is this okay?
Sure, yeah. Go fire away.
So I attended an info session with the O'Connell people a week or 2 weeks ago, and they let us know that they've really abandoned pretty much the entire plan that they had come to this committee and the town with for a couple of years going now. I'm their next door neighbor, so I'm pretty intimately aware of the work that they've been doing. Um, I wasn't sure if this committee was aware of that or if they had made you guys aware of that, but I figured since you guys have, contributed to that project and taken an interest in it, the least due diligence that they could do would be to loop you guys in. That in large part they've abandoned any plans that they had to turn that into a residential space. The cupola still doesn't seem to be replaced, and they're really talking about some significant limitations that they have discovered that are going to prevent them from really being able to do much of anything with it.
And this was a meeting with what entity, Daniel?
The O'Connell Development Group, the people doing the church at Phillips and Hawley.
Right. And who attended that meeting?
It was a local meeting for probably all the residents in the community. This was about they have a building that they're proposing for the parking lot of that church that you guys have contributed towards. In the parking lot, they want to build a high density, high rise rental unit. Um, that's its own issue, but what they effectively the lead that they buried at the meeting was that they've effectively moved the residential plans into that parking lot plan, and that the church would be functioning as maybe some sort of a rental office for that building, or they kept on using the word amenities as if it could be a gym or something like that. But it was pretty palpable that they've really just given up on whatever they had planned there. I wasn't sure how conditional their original plan was with you guys and the oversight, but it seemed like they were burying the lead a bit, but they have left the church.
Sarah, comments on this?
Yeah, so the Community Preservation Act funding related only to preservation of the structure and the exterior of the building. So it didn't fund housing in any way. It did require that historic preservation restriction be placed on the structure. And that requires that the Historic Commission review and approve any
Sure. Well, so
changes.
so I know that you guys have had some back and forth with them about the cupola. I'm intimately aware of this because they lifted it over my property in order to remove it. And it does not appear that will be being replaced despite what they may have told you guys. So yeah, I don't know about conditional or whatnot, but I just want to make sure that you guys are being roped in. It seems like they're making a lot of changes to, their original plans.
Sarah?
So the CPA funds have all been expended on the work that was proposed to the exterior of the structure. So the Historic Commission would need to review and approve any additional changes. They were updated as required at the end of 2024 about the status of the cupola. So that's not a foregone conclusion yet. They're still sort of figuring out what's going on, but CPA funds were all expended as they were proposed to be.
But thank you very much, Daniel, for your interest and keeping us up to date on what's going
Yeah.
on.
Well, and I
had-
know, yeah, if I can just speak to this for a second, just from looking into this committee and trying to kind of figure out how the whole thing works, because I'm just sort of just navigating all of this now. I do know that you guys have, you are empowered to some degree with helping to finance things to aid the residents of Northampton. And so I think it would be on that grounds that I would at least expect as a neighbor of this project that they would be looping us in when the plans for how this building will function change that radically. Again, I think what I'd like to just sort of highlight is that because this is now conditional on a larger building project that they have planned that they're going to be trying to push through, I'm unclear about exactly what is happening with that church since they took your guys' funds. I don't know if they're going to try to sell it or I don't know, but it's they seem pretty done with it and pretty unsure of how to go forward, despite any promises they might have made to this committee.
Great. Well, thank you, Daniel, for your concern and for bringing us that to our attention. We appreciate.
All right, yeah, thank you guys for holding this meeting. If I could make a general point, it's very hard to figure out how to attend and watch this meeting based on available public information on the Northampton government website. I don't know if anything can be done about that, but especially because it's a remote only, that was very tricky to find my way here.
That's good to know as well. Thank you for sharing that, and we'll make sure to try to rectify that to make it easier.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other general public comment? Okay, so the main business at hand today is to review the one small grant application that we've gotten, which is the Forbes Library Fabric Preservation project. And we will do that in just a little bit, but we have a few items of business to attend to. The first is the approval of minutes, and we're going back to May 1st, 2024. Sarah sent us those minutes. Is there any additions, subtractions, concerns about the minutes that people would like to share? Martha?
Just that in under the heading, it's the fourth heading down, approved council orders for spring 2024. There's an incomplete sentence in that. Megan McDonough discussed other safeguards in place beyond CPA funding, comma, and and then there's nothing there. It just, is that meant to
Sarah?
be?
I think Sarah was going to correct that. She was aware of that and was going to fill in
Okay.
the blanks there. Sarah, and any blanks you want to fill in that incomplete sentence? Searching.
Looking, hold on.
You need another minute, Sarah?
I change it to safeguard affordability.
So how does the last sentence read?
So Megan McDonough discussed other safeguards in place beyond CPA funding to protect affordability.
Okay, that'll work. I think there was one misspelling at the end, very end, but that's okay. Any other things, Martha? Good to go? Is there a motion to accept the meetings of 2001 as the incomplete sentence was filled in?
So moved.
Martha moves a second. Julia, thank you. Oh God, I always forget. Sarah, do we vote on approval of minutes?
We do. So quick roll call vote. Jeff?
Yes.
Devin?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
Martha?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Chris Tate?
Yes.
Chris Hellman?
Yes.
And Brian?
Yes.
Unanimous, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and we'll hope for a couple of other minutes to come in the next meeting.
This wasn't the most recent set. This was just one that got missed.
Great, thank you for doing that. Let's see, Chair's report, just a couple things. One is, folks may have noticed a little over 6 weeks ago in the Gazette, January 7th, was a nice, fairly big article, Council K's 1.2 million in CPA funding. And it talked about the projects that we funded in the last round, and some nice quotes from Sarah, and a quote from I think one of the city councilors about the projects as well. So it was good to see a little bit of coverage in the newspaper. The other thing I would like to point out is looking at the schedule for this round. We go right into the next meeting, which is next week, the 5th, where we begin immediately to meet with applicants. Sarah, I see that you have committee members' questions for applicants due to you on March 5th, but then we begin to meet with applicants on March 5th, and questions don't come back to us until March 10th. There's a little bit of a disconnect there. Can you help us navigate that? Do you understand my concern?
Yeah, and if anyone has questions and wants to get them in sooner for the first group of applicants, I can certainly pass those along.
And how have we scheduled which group is when?
Oh, I didn't tell you, did I? So I'm waiting to hear back from a few applicants about their constraints. So I'll get that first agenda posted tomorrow and send it out to everyone.
Great. So the quicker we can get to Sarah questions that we have to applicants, particularly the ones that are meeting with us on March 5th, the sooner she can turn that back to them and they can get back to us. So it'll make our meetings a little bit tighter.
And questions not required. You could certainly feel free to ask questions during the meetings with applicants process, but particularly if you're looking for something that might be like a additional budget information or something that you might want it to the record, that would be a good written question.
Great. Good. So any questions about the schedule, the spring schedule coming up?
Oh.
Everybody's good to-
One thing we didn't have as a separate agenda item, but and we could discuss it afterwards, is setting up the site visits.
Yes.
So since everyone's seen the applications, if you're thinking that one of them might be good for an organized site visit, that's something we could schedule.
So if we look at the sites that are out there, I'm trying to think which ones might be interesting for site visits, and certainly the DAR house, perhaps, the Ruggles Center accessibility, that perhaps. I don't know if the cemetery stone preservation, if that would be one we would want to visit as well. Those three seem to me the most obvious for site visits. Did other people have certain places they were wanting to go or deal with? I mean, Leeds School, we could just drop by there and take a look. Mansfield, same thing. Laurel Park, it seems like we can drive through that as well, the Boggy Meadow Trail. Folks can, I think, hike on their own if they can get through the ice. Hopefully that'll be gone soon. Do people have interest in going to the Clap House, to the Ruggles Center, or to look at the cemetery? Is that of interest? This is where you have to say something. Yes, maybe, no.
Brian, the Ruggles Center keeps regular hours, so we wouldn't have to go as a group. We could just go at our convenience.
Great. Thank you for that, Devin. I don't think the Clap House does
Yeah, the DAR does not.
not.
We'd have to make arrangements for that one.
Yeah. So I'm finding a little humor in this, is that I might not be able to get to the Clap House accessibility thing because it's not accessible to take a look at. So that is sort of funny, isn't it? Oh my goodness. The world is an interesting place. But Clap House people interested? Anyone? Yes? Maybe. Sarah, could you just send out yeah, I'm seeing some.
Yeah, I mean, generally, what times of days of the week would be better for people who are interested in going to the DAR house? I know they would love to show it to anyone, probably at any time of day.
Prefer mornings. I think the last time we went, if those of us who went, I think it was in the morning.
What time morning? I mean, could we get a few done in a morning? The Clap House and where is the cemetery stone preservation again? Is that
The cemetery stonework was proposed at Park Street and West Farms, and both of those will be difficult to access in the snow.
okay? And I suppose people can get to there themselves to take a look at the graveyard. So it looks like the Clap House. Is that it? Is that the only one that folks are finding that they could not get to themselves?
Brian, I'm interested in seeing a little bit more of the textile that are being proposed by.
Historic Northampton?
Yeah, because it's a large request, and I don't know. I think it would be at least one or a couple of us, might want to actually see these things in person and get
And
a
I
better
think
understanding.
I think Lori would be more than happy to show us that as well, Lori or Betty. So
Okay.
um, those two, could we get both of those done in the same morning? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, are you able to send out a little doodle poll or something
Yeah.
about scheduling those two?
Sure, absolutely, we'll do. Yeah, I know both of those applicants would be thrilled to show what's being proposed.
So the Clap House, Historic Northampton, anything else that folks want to go to? All right, those two are on our site visit list, and Sarah will send us out. Next up, oh, any other questions about the schedule that is up there? No? All right, moving along to the financial overview and the recap. As folks know, from what Sarah sent out to us, there's about $1,586,000 that is being asked for this round. The big project is an accessible playground at Leeds, come in at 619,000. We have 1.155 million, 1,155,000 to work with, so that puts us about 400 something thousand short. Remember that 1.155 million to work with does not include the 402,000 that were bonded for JFK. So that is in addition to that. But we have 9 applicants coming in. That's including the small grant that we have for Forbes that we will be spending our time dealing with tonight. Sarah, what other things do you want to lead us through in this?
Yeah, I think that's a great summary. I point out too that some of those funds available for the remainder of the fiscal year are restricted to the open space reserve and the historic reserve. 267,000 is in the open space reserve, and 140, just under 141,000 is in the historic reserve.
So that's good to know in terms of those restrictions that apply to our spending. Questions for Sarah about the finances? Chris, Tate.
Which projects are eligible for bonding in this round? I'd assume Leeds Playground is one.
Yes, Leeds Playground definitely would be, Boggy Meadow Trail. Cemetery stone preservation. I think that would probably be it.
Okay, good to know. Other questions for Sarah? Okay, thank you, Sarah, for putting this together. And there's no
Actually,
other,
before we move on, I do wanna ask a question. Sorry, Brian, I didn't get there sooner. Sarah, on the bonding, when we recommend a project for bonding, it's actually the city that goes out and does that, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And they do bonding for things that we don't request. So okay. So what happens effectively is that when we recommend bonding, we're the ones who take on the debt on behalf of the city. But they're equipped to take on bond debt for other projects. They're just using we just become the bill payer in these situations. So it's not an either or. In theory, projects that we bond could be bonded by the city directly if they chose to do so without us being the payors of that note. Is that correct?
Only if there were funds available to do so.
Well, I'm not asking that. I'm asking technically whether it's a possibility.
It's a big question, I guess. So, the city is able to seek borrowing for these projects because there is committed CPA funding available to pay the obligation. Otherwise, this wouldn't be programmed into the budget and wouldn't be available for bonding, absent a much larger discussion.
Okay. All right.
If the city did it directly, then they do it through their capital improvements, or they do it through some structure that they've got for their own projects.
Yeah, it would need to come from some other source. So the city couldn't borrow without some mechanism to be able to repay those bonds that are being issued.
Okay. Thank you.
that answers your question, Chris, to your satisfaction?
Not to my satisfaction, but it's been answered. So
I mean, it would need to be part of a bigger budget
no,
discussion.
I get it. I get
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And the applications that come before the CPC applicants are typically saying, in conjunction with capital improvement funding or grants or other city funds, this CPA funding is necessary to allow the project to occur.
Any other
Thank
questions
you.
for Sarah?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Any other questions for Sarah on the budget? All right. Sarah, looking at the projects that we funded in the past, can you give us just a sort of a brief summary of what's going on, what the status is of some of those? What
Sure.
we're continuing to work on? Anything we should know about current projects that are still in the works?
And is there anything anyone's wondering about in particular? I mean, of the projects that were funded last round, I know Valley CDC has started working on their mortgage subsidy program. Habitat for Humanity has been chugging along on their, not only Northampton, but regional list of housing production programs. Go back a little farther.
The pickleball courts,
Pickleball courts have broken ground and are underway, and a robust fundraising effort has been going on in conjunction with the CPA funds. Let's go back to the last fiscal year.
pickleball should be completed by the end of the calendar year. Is that correct?
Julia, do you know what the target date of the end of that is?
Yeah, May.
May, that's great.
Wow. That's coming right up. Any other projects we should be aware of? I know I drive down Laurel Street a few times a week. and it's pretty spectacular. If you haven't driven that street, to look at those 20 units. Sarah,
And
yeah, tell us.
I was able to take a tour of the Laurel Street project, and Valley CDC relayed that they had 1,800 applications for those units.
Wow.
1,800 applications for 20 units. My goodness, it's pretty astounding, isn't it? I'm sure they'll have their work cut out finding who the best fit is for those wonderful 20 units. Any other projects that people have questions about, what the status is, where it's going for Sarah? Martha?
Yeah, I wondered about the Ryan Road School Playground because I don't think that's begun yet. And I thought that was kind of like I mean, not an emergency, but they were very anxious to get that built.
Yeah,
last
so
year, right? We bonded that, right?
yes, so that hasn't begun construction. But I'm just pulling up my invoices. They have the city's been working with Berkshire Design Group to do some design work for the site.
And is that work going to be financed through our contribution, or how's that going to be financed? Because that wasn't part of the original application, as I recall.
That was part of, so that it's bidding and construction administration and construction document prep.
That's what they're doing in addition to what we funded? Because as I recall, they were just going to be replacing, they weren't doing any alteration to the site at all. They were just replacing what was there in the same footprint. But that sounds like that's not what's
Yeah,
happening.
so no, so I misspoke. It's not site work. It's construction documentation, bidding, and eventually the CA for the project.
Okay, and then my question is that being covered by the bond, the amount we funded?
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
So that's part of the overall project management and final construction design and bidding.
thanks.
Is that a project that is set to be completed this calendar year?
I can get an update on that. I don't know what the target date for the construction is. I'm typically with a playground project, once they get going, it's pretty quick. So I wouldn't be surprised, but I can find out for the next meeting.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that actually, because that was one I was going to ask about, and Brian reminded me, and thank you, Martha, because we do have in front of us, a very similar proposal. It'd be good to have some information about the experience that Ryan Road is having with their project as we discuss what's going to happen with Leeds. Because my suspicion is, and I'm hopeful that Leeds won't be the only one that we'll see other playground proposals come before us, but I'd like to, before we get too far down the road, I'd like to see some tangible information about how these are working out.
Yeah, and Brian, I remember you specifically had some concerns about who was going to be overseeing the project. And it sounds like they made a wise choice to get a professional design firm in there to manage that part of it. The construction administration would be that, they would be overseeing it getting done properly, we presume, so.
Right.
It's good.
Good. Any other questions for Sarah about current projects and their progress? Good to go. All right, moving right along, and thank you, Lisa and Julie, for hanging in there, and Dylan, it looks like, with us. We just have one more item to attend to, and then we'll get to reviewing the Forbes Library grant request. Electing chair and vice chair. It has been my honor and pleasure to serve as chair of this committee. I am, and I think Chris's honor and pleasure to serve as vice chair. I'm more than happy to relinquish that if someone else is interested and enthusiastic about stepping up. I don't know if Chris feels the same about his position, but I've forgotten how we do this election. It seems odd that I would be the one doing it. Sarah, can you guide us through this?
Let me just say, if you're interested in standing, Brian, it'd be my pleasure to nominate you for chair.
second that
well-
nomination.
Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Julia. Does anyone else want to take on this job? And if you do, talk to Sarah, and she can impeach me somehow, I'm sure. There must be some rule about that.
Chris, are
Well-
you willing to do vice chair?
If nobody else is interested,
So I would nominate you to be vice chair, and then we can do the voice vote together for
I
both
second that.
nominations.
Second by Martha. Thank you, Devin. Sarah, will take us through
Sure.
that?
So roll call vote for slate of candidates is for Brian as chair and Chris as vice chair. Jeff,
Yes.
Devin,
Yes,
Julia,
Absolutely.
Martha,
Yes.
Kevin,
Enthusiastic, yes.
Chris Tate,
Yes.
Chris Hellman,
one half yes, one half abstain.
and Brian.
One half yes, one half abstain.
thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. But once again, it's such a pleasure and an honor to be on this committee with such wonderful, wonderful folks. All right, moving right along, we have one small grant applicant to look at. We have not had small grant applicants, any small grant applicants in, oh my goodness. I'm not quite sure when the last one was. But as you know, we have set up this program to make it not as quite as a rigorous deal for those folks coming in under 5,000. This grant proposed by Forbes Library and is this textile collection conservation program. The request is for $3,000. The goal, if we're able to do so, is to try to both discuss and vote on this tonight. We can vote to recommend and put it through at full or partial funding. We can vote that we want more information about it and put it back into the general cycle of looking at with the other 8 applicants, or we can vote no, that we're not interested in moving it along. Devin has suggested that she step to the side for this discussion because she is a Forbes trustee. Sarah, is that something that Devin needs to do with not confidential, whatever the statute is?
Yeah, and if there's no financial conflict, then it wouldn't be a necessity, but if Devin, if you feel more comfortable doing that, that's.
Yeah, Sarah,
fine.
I would like to abstain from voting on this one, but I would like to participate. Does anyone have any problem with me following along?
No, of course not.
Okay, thank you.
Great. All right, so we have this $5,000 project, 3,000 requested from CPC for the Forbes Library Textile Collection Conservation Project. Lisa or Dylan or Julie, are the 3 of you here to speak to that? I don't know who wants to begin, Lisa?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and begin. So I'm Lisa Downing, the director of the Forbes Library. I know many of you. Thank you for having us tonight, and thank you for having this small grant program. It was much easier and really just targets exactly the funding we need right now. So we're excited to submit this application. I'm going to turn it over to Julie and Dylan to talk about the specifics. So they oversee the proposal actually would benefit 2 separate collections, both related to local history, one also related to national history. But the thing I wanted to say is that the special collections of all types, including these 2 collections at Forbes, are having a renaissance. We are just in the early stages of redesigning the Coolidge Museum, which hopefully you'll hear more about. We're really excited about that, and having this assessment work done will help us to know the condition of these textiles, some of which we hope to put on display. And on the Hampshire Room for Local History side, we are continuing to collect Northampton's history, which is so important. And the collections that are being talked about tonight are 20th century collections. And it's important that we take good care of those for researchers now and into the future. So I don't know, between Julie and Dylan, I'll let the two of you decide who wants to speak next, but I'll stay quiet, but happy to answer questions at any point.
Thank you, Lisa.
So I'm Julie Bartlett Nelson. I'm the head of the Calvin Coolidge Museum. I've also worked in the local history department as well, and I've been at Forbes since 2004. And so our project we're coming with today is really to engage. We're going to be engaging a Museum Textile Services of Andover to evaluate our textiles within the Coolidge collection as well as the local history collection to get things ready and prepared to put on permanent or temporary display within the Forbes building, but also particularly with the local history items of how do we prepare items to display in other places within the community. So whether that would be in other museums, but also I think we're thinking about also non-traditional venues and how do we secure and display materials as well. So engaging the professional as in that process. We have contracted for the Coolidge Museum with Design Division of Amherst. We've had a kickoff meeting to start working with them to reimagine the Coolidge Museum. So you'll probably be hearing more of that over the next 2 years as we progress with that. And one of the first things he identified with us is the need to bring a conservator to the collection to really review what we have for textiles for Coolidge. And so some of those relate locally, but nationally as well. And getting them ready. Are they stable enough to put on exhibit? And then also educate us in rehousing materials as well. We have submitted a museum assessment program application, which will also bring someone on site to do a whole overview of collection stewardship with us as part of this process as well. And so we're waiting to hear back on that, and that will review other collection, the entire museum collections. And Dylan has just received word of a grant through the state that will bring somebody to review the local history collection in a similar way. So we're also engaging in those processes as well. But this, we're kind of jumping ahead as we think about what we can do with materials as part of the Coolidge redesign, what to include and not include. So that's kind of why we're jumping at sort of ahead of the other two projects with this as well. And I think we've had some examples we submitted with the application with this as well. And I've got a few, they're kind of sitting on my desk if you want to wear Coolidge's governor's top hat, which is really a fun piece as well. And so I'll let Dylan tell you a little bit more about what he oversees for more modern collections.
Thanks, Julie. Can you hear me all right? I'm at the Arts and Music desk, so we've got public all around us. So just let me know if they start getting loud, despite it being a library. So I'm Dylan Gaffney. I work in local history and the archives here at Forbes. I also serve on the Historic Commission with Martha. Lifelong resident of Northampton. My parents grew up in Northampton. I've worked at Forbes for 16 years, I think now, and was at Lilly Library before that. So one of the things that I found when I started working more and more in the archives was that it's an incredible collection. It reflects, we have documents going back to the mid 1600s and the first arrival of the colonists in Northampton, but it really was short on the Northampton that I knew growing up. It didn't reflect the Northampton of the 70s, 80s, 90s, let alone today. So one of the areas that I've been concentrating a lot on is collecting that history, and that could be sort of larger cultural movements like the music scene. So some of the items in here are from the Iron Horse collection, which Shorty Harold donated to Forbes. It's like 30 boxes of materials, largely paper, but there are a lot of concert shirts, and I included a couple of those in the application from sort of what's often called the Cultural Renaissance. And then another major project and focus for collecting for us has been on trying to create a representative collection about the LGBTQ plus community in Northampton, which was really desperately underrepresented in our archive. So a couple of years ago, we started an oral history project with Smith College that was initially focused on the oral history of the Northampton Gay and Lesbian Liberation March, which is now called the Northampton Pride Parade or Hampshire Pride. And along the way, we wanted to collect materials so that we had a collection that was freely accessible to the public in the way some academic archives are often not. So we started receiving materials. A number of the t-shirts that were included in the application, such as this Peacekeepers shirt from 1983, which would have been worn by somebody standing on the side at the parade, or 1984 beautiful screen printed t-shirt from the parade. Were donated by David Stevens, who was a well-known figure and beloved figure in the community, and collected a lot of materials that became a key part of our collection. Yeah, so we've really been focusing on trying to, because both of these sets of clothing are part of larger collections, we really want to keep them together. We really think they tell a story largely together. So it's important that we keep them at Forbes, even though we don't have a lot of textiles historically in my section of the library.
Thank you, Dylan and Julie and Lisa. Anything, Lisa and Julie, to add to what Dylan just said?
I will, oh, sorry, Julie, I'll just say one thing. It is our textiles are a very small part of our of all of our collections, unlike Historic Northampton. And I want to give a shout out to Historic Northampton. We were inspired by the work that they're doing over there and said, who are they working with? So they were very supportive of this. But I do agree with Dylan's last statement on both sides that the textiles add depth and breadth to the stories that we're telling. And the exhibit designers actually on the Coolidge side talking about an armoire type of situation that was the 20s, and we don't have any of Grace's clothing. Historic Northampton does. Maybe we'll be in talks with them, but having being able to see what somebody wore, tells you about, what their size was and more about the times. And it's another avenue for engagement. And it just feels really important that we know that we're taking the best care we can if we're going to put these fragile collections out in public on both sides. So this assessment work, it feels very important to us at this time.
Julie, anything to add?
And I was going to say something similar in terms of we in our collection, and Forbes has benefited greatly from previous funds for climate control and securing our infrastructure and physical facility. And I think this is where we've been working the last few years on storage upgrades in general to the collections. So this project mirrors that of how can we be storing items better, preservation wise as well. And Dylan and I are both sort of paper and photograph experts. So textiles, we've been leaning towards other museum professionals at Smith, as well as Historic Northampton folks as well, and volunteers who have helped us out with their expertise. And so this is leading us into this project with, it's really important, I think, for the professionals to come on site and be able to touch and hold all these things rather than, review things, photographs of materials as well. So being able to have the opportunity to bring the experts on site and work with us, we're really excited for that and grateful for you to consider this application.
Thank you, Julie and Dylan and Lisa. Questions for the Forbes Library folks? Any questions? Martha?
Yes, thank you. One of the things that I just and this may be in the works, especially if you're working with design division and you have that whole route that you're going, how these things are going to be presented to the public. And does the library have space to do that? You know, you have the gallery outside of the presidential library. Are there other spaces in the library that where that can be done, or are you imagining going off site? I'm just curious, just to see how these are going to get out into the public. The hope is.
Yeah, I think for that, the plan would be mostly for them to be displayed within the Coolidge Museum. I think knowing the sort of conditions required for us to be able to loan things to other museums and other places. That's something we haven't done with sort of hats, boots. We have like chaps with the cowboy hats that were gifted to Coolidge. And so some of these things that we haven't loaned out to other museums, say to his birthplace in Vermont, or a couple of museums in South Dakota where he received them at, and we haven't done that. And so knowing if things could travel outside as well. We traditionally haven't put archival objects kind of other places in our building, mostly for climate control or having them locked up in cases. And so that's something else we'd be talking with them about to consider, you know, what are the conditions to put things in other places within the building. What we've had currently and what we will plan to have in a new design too is there'll be permanent exhibits, but then also some spots that would rotate. And hats have been a very popular rotation. So every time they've come out every few years, they've been very, very popular of the many hats of Coolidge. And so it's been sort of a beloved piece of the collection. And so we will continue in the future with a new design to be able to do that as well. And preservation wise of, you know, what can we keep out longer and for how long is a question to consider. I think for the local history items, there really is the desire to put them other places in the community for people to see, as well as then help bring people into the library to look at them as well. So that's definitely on our minds. I think we've been a little hesitant because we weren't quite sure how to do it safely. And so I think that's what we'll be learning as well.
Yeah, I would add that, you know, we've talked some, I work really closely with Historic Northampton. We've talked some about collaborating on exhibitions and exhibits. I'm on their exhibit committee right now. So I can see a lot of ways these could be utilized there. The Iron Horse asked us if we could put some in a case there. I want an expert to tell me that I should never do that because of all the risks of it. There are some locked display cases that we could use for something flat. Here in the Arts and Music Department, we have some portable display cases which lock. So for some special exhibits, say it's around the time of Pride, we could create a little temporary display within the library, which might make sense. Or for, you know, like Julie said, for collaborations with other local organizations.
Other questions for Lisa, Julie, or Dylan?
Oh, and can I just add, we have, we engaged with a state grant a few years ago. We have professional photographs of many of the items. So the photos we did submit in the application were done that way. And so we do have photographs of items in our collections database online. So that's also been a tool to get people aware of what's here and be able to use it for research as well. But it's really exciting when we can put them out on display and or invite people in. They can make a research appointment to see anything that's not on display too. So they're always welcome to come in and do that. So if you'd love to see any of these things, I'm always happy to pull them out of the shelves and show you.
I really appreciate the expanded view of history and all of this. I think it's very, very important, not only just the breadth of it, but also the contemporary nature of what Dylan's doing. Really, really important.
Are there any federal funds ever available for presidential libraries, or are they all just nonprofits and no money comes in?
So the National Archive System is every president after Coolidge. So it's Hoover and up that's part of the National Archives system. So we are kind of the last of what's considered the private ones. We have applied and are planning to do more, hopefully, of federal grants through IMLS, NEH, NEA that have funded projects, but there's no sort of mechanism in place to provide sort of operational ongoing funding for the pre-Hoover libraries. There's been many, many attempts over the years, and they kind of stall out in committee and have never been actually fully funded.
So Hoover going forward can receive federal funds for their presidential libraries, but Coolidge is the last one that cannot.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know, we apply for the same competitive grants that any other kind of museum archive library does, but in terms of the regular sort of federal funding through the National Archives system, is Hoover and up. And we're the only one in a public library, so it's totally unique and kind of exciting there as well. And that Coolidge himself and the librarian at the time, you know, created this collection and brought the materials here for the public to see and use and appreciate. So that's, you know, kind of our unique claim to fame.
Other questions for the Forbes folks? Are we ready to vote on this? Yes? Okay, can somebody make a motion out there?
Yeah, I move that we fund the textile assessment request in the amount of $3,000.
Thank you, Julie. Is there a second? Kevin with his hand up. Any discussion or further discussion on this project? Okay, if there's been a motion and seconded to approve the full $3,000 ask to Forbes for this presidential library and also other textile preservation. Sarah, can you take us through a roll call?
Roll call vote on the 3,000 recommendation. Jeff?
Yes.
Devin?
Abstain.
Devin's abstaining. Julia?
Yes.
Martha?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Chris Tate?
Yes.
Chris Hellman?
Yes.
And Brian?
Yes. So thank you, Lisa and Julie and Dylan, for bringing this project to us, and good luck in reimagining the wonderful little unique presidential library that we have at Forbes.
Thank
And the
you.
other work with the
I-
Pride t-shirts and the Iron Horse t-shirts and all of that.
I'd like to add a comment that Dylan, I knew you in the late 70s when you were a little boy. And Sally and I were your upstairs neighbors on Elm Street. So, and I
Oh my
haven't
God,
seen you since
at
then.
229? Wow.
Yes, right, exactly. I haven't seen you
Wow.
since then, but I'm glad to see you doing this work.
Oh,
Thank you.
what a way to make that connection. Thank you for saying that.
Kevin, Dylan, Kevin, there we go. Any other, I think we are moving through that. So Lisa, Julie, and Dylan, you're welcome to stay for the next minute or two. Otherwise, feel free to leave us. Thank you for your work and thank you for moving these projects forward.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next line item, it's question and answers for applicants. If there were any applicants out there who were wanting to ask us questions in advance of the review, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, there was nobody out here. Is that right? No one else?
No, I don't. This is getting to be increasingly less used, but I always include it on the agenda just in case.
Okay, so last but not least, any other business not foreseen when the agenda was published? Anybody else have anything out there? Chris Tate.
I just have a quick question about the Leeds playground project, and maybe Sarah, you can just answer it right away, but I wasn't clear. Is this the playground that's right next to the school, next to the kindergarten rooms? Or is this the overall, the bigger one that's down at the bottom of the hill?
I didn't look at it in too much detail, but from the description, I believe it's the first one you mentioned, the kindergarten rooms playground.
Okay. Yeah, that would have a lot less site work and drainage problems associated with it. So I just wasn't clear. There wasn't like an overall site plan that showed what they were talking about. But it sounded from the description like it was probably the one right next to the building.
So
Yeah.
Chris, if you're facing the sort of the driveway that goes to the main entrance, where is it?
It's right next to the bus loop,
Okay,
essentially. It's at grade with the bus loop sidewalk.
so it's so the upper level there. Got it. Thank you. That's helpful.
That's my question. I don't know, but that's kind of what I thought, maybe. So I guess that is a question for the applicant. It's just
Right.
which-
That's a good
which playground
one
are we
for the
talking about?
No,
Because I would have questions about the accessibility of the lower one also. So
yeah, I'm almost positive it's that first smaller playground that you mentioned, but I'll put that to the applicant and just make sure that that's correct.
okay, thank you.
Any other business not foreseen when the agenda was published? So as soon as we can get
If
questions.
nobody else is, I'm just gonna throw this out there. I was, wanted to follow up on something that Daniel said earlier about the, St. John's project. I, I'm glad that Sarah pointed out that the money we approved had nothing to do with the housing component. It was about preserving the structure. But it struck me that we really don't have a whole heck of a lot of recourse once the funds that we allocated have been expended to keep projects on track as we saw them. And I this hasn't come up, at least for me, in the time that I've been here, but it's an interesting question, and I think I want to think about it a little bit more.
And I was led to believe there are no plans now for anything in the interior. Sarah, is that correct to your knowledge?
Yeah, I know that I don't have a ton of knowledge about exactly what's proposed and what the details are, but I know that some unforeseen issues with the foundation and some other problems as it would relate to converting the building to housing were discovered. So the developer was trying to figure out, what could we use this for instead of that while still retaining the structure. And nothing has been filed with the city yet at this point. That was an initial meeting with neighbors.
Is that something you can keep us abreast on, Sarah?
Sure.
As you know, this stuff comes up because, and I'm sure you would do that with any other project that
Yeah.
veered in a very different direction.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about this one is that because the Community Preservation Committee specifically required this historic preservation restriction, that grants, the city some review authority that wouldn't be able to happen in any other circumstance. So anything that's proposed to the exterior of the structure that's different than what was already approved has to be reviewed and approved by the Historical Commission. So, and that will happen in perpetuity. That restriction also carries affirmative maintenance and insurance responsibilities, not only for this owner, but for any owner of that building going forward.
Sarah,
And
can you
maybe
clarify
yeah.
that's the structure, but not the entire property on which that structure sits. It's just the structure itself, correct?
For the most part, I mean, if something were to be like a new building were to be proposed, that would also require review, but primarily it deals with the structure itself.
Chris Hellman?
Yeah, no, what I was going to say, and I'm sorry to step on Julia's feet there. And maybe that's the answer that I'm looking for, is that as we move forward, we want to continue, at least in projects that are historic preservation, is to have those safeguards in place. Because I mean, the truth is that condition issues are going to arise in older buildings that aren't foreseen, until you start taking things apart. So it's not inconceivable that we're not going to have similar things happen in the future. It just struck me that when the money's gone, what leverage do we have? So I think that's a good warning to heed as we move forward on similar historic projects that we want to ensure that those protections are in place wherever possible.
One thing to note is that there was a request, and Sarah, make sure I don't botch this up. There was a request that came in this round from First Church for preservation of the Oregon. Was that this round, Sarah? Or was that last round?
So the First Churches has come forward a few times with hopeful potential applications, and none of those have been determined eligible given the Acton case and the and the other issues, particularly with regard to historic structures. So they were looking maybe to use some Community Preservation Act funds to restore their interior organ, which is certainly historic, but which the city solicitor weighed in and said, this has a strictly religious purpose. On top of that, it is, interior to the church, and we can't regulate that or address it moving forward. And this isn't something that would be able to be funded with public money.
And there was another proposal from First Church as well?
They submitted a similar, like, sort of initial request regarding the bell and the stairs that lead up to it with a similar finding.
I was interested to read, and I believe it was Hadley that used CPC money to renovate the steeple of the church there, right on Route 9, I believe. And so exterior stuff like that on churches is still acceptable and appropriate. Is that correct?
It can be, depending on the circumstance, yeah.
Any other questions for Sarah about anything? Any other business not foreseen when the agenda was published? So we will see you next week at this time with the first 4 or maybe 5, probably 4, right? We're trying to do 4.
It should be 4, yeah. And I was just trying to line up applicants, other constraints and issues before I set those agendas, but I should be able to get both of those to you.
And Sarah, you'll get back to us about a day for a couple site visits at least, if we can get a morning, and that would be really helpful too. All right, folks. It's with all the what some people construe as very negative news that is out there. I just did want to reiterate one really positive thing I saw in the Gazette. I believe it was in today's paper for those that read it, which is that we are probably not going to be hit by an asteroid, or was it a meteor, one of those things, in 2032. So the bar has gone so low that the great news is that the Earth will not be destroyed in 7 years from now, to the best of their knowledge. It might hit the moon, the article said, but not us. So I guess we should anything to get a good read on.
And the planets are visible in the afternoon sky, so that's something
Right.
not to miss. There,
like 5 of them or something.
Clear, right? The clouds will go away. Yeah, it's a good thing.
Oh, there you go. All right, thank you very much, and we'll see you in a week.
Thanks, everyone.